International Forum. Today we're taking a look at what is happening right now in the Gaza Strip, with Hamas saying protests will continue. 54 dead already as at last count. Will there be an increment in the death rate? We don't know, but Israeli, they are keen on defending their territory. Some persons are of the opinion that what the Israeli did is quite inhuman and it's a gross violation of human rights. They are saying people are throwing stones at them, throwing explosive devices at them, but they have the right to defend themselves, all because of what Donald Trump said and backed it up with action by placing a U.S. embassy in Jerusalem, declaring it the capital, the true capital of Israel. And that has been rocking the boat in the Middle East. With me here in the studio to talk about this is political analyst John Welcome Williams Owaifo. Welcome to the show.
Thank you very much.
I appreciate your comment.
Thank you very much.
All right, so for what is really happening right now in the Gaza Strip, what can you make out of it?
Well, good afternoon, my viewers. I've always said it here on International Forum that Donald Trump's attitude since he came to the White House, or since his emergence as President of the United States, has been that of a distortionist. In a bid to please his base, the evangelicals and those whom he thinks voted for him, he's been doing a lot of things that are, out of the box, in as much as sometimes those actions may work, but he is just out there trying to do what he thinks his people or the people that voted him would like, without really putting into consideration the collateral damage that could spill out from his actions. I mean, since 1980, when the UN Security Council asked for or resolved, because nations came together and said, okay, let there be a two-state solution for Palestine and Israel, because there's been crisis ever since the Israelis were brought by the British army since 1948. There's been crisis in that place, and both parties or both countries have been trying to fight for territories. And you know how it is when humans fight for land spaces and all that. It usually results in killings. So the UN Security Council members came together and said, okay, let there be a two-state solution whereby we can have a defined territory for both nations, where Israelis can decide their fate and Palestinians on the other side can decide their fate. And as at that time, Israelis were occupying the West Bank and East Jerusalem, and the Palestinians were on the other side occupying the Gaza Strip and the other part of the town. But ever since then, American presidents have always been very, very sensitive to the issues concerning that region, because it's a very volatile region. I mean, you have a lot of extremist organizations, a lot of extremist religious groups out there waiting for the slightest provocation to swing into action and start killing the next man. So it's been an understanding by the international, by the different nations that make up the UN Security Council that, look, we need to look for a solution to this crisis. But before this solution is reached, let us ensure that both parties keep to their territories. But what's been happening is that because Israel is being backed or is an ally to most of the Western nations, Russia, America, the Britons, they are all behind them. Maybe because of the biblical belief that any nation that supports Israel has the backing of God. That's the God factor that is there. And America has always solidarized with Israel. And because of that, Israel has been expanding their territories. There's been a lot of settlements that were not agreed on by the UN Security Council or by the UN. So these expansions has led to a lot of hostilities in that region. And because of that, Jerusalem being the melting pot of Christians, Jews, and even Muslims, everybody agreed that, okay, nobody's going to take their embassy to Jerusalem, because it's a place that is keenly contested by all of these parties. And a move of an embassy to that place would indicate that you are no longer asking for a two-state solution, and then you are just saying, okay, the embassy which is moved, the country's embassy that has been moved there, has legitimately becomes the person who is supposed to occupy that place. And this is a place that has been dragged for by both parties for years. So when in 1995 the U.S. Congress agreed, or they came to that agreement that the U.S. embassy should be moved to Jerusalem, because of the volatility of that region, all past presidents have always had that understanding that, look, we need to sign a waiver every 6 months, because every waiver that is signed, after 6 months, another waiver has to be signed, or else the embassy will be moved from Tel Aviv to Jerusalem, which would cause a lot of crisis. Knowing this, previous presidents, from President Clinton to President George Bush to Obama, they've been deferring the movement of the embassy from Tel Aviv to Jerusalem. But what do we have in our hands now? A distortionist in chief in the White House, in the person of President Donald J. Trump, who has decided against all logical reasoning that he has to do what he has to do because his base wants it, and because he has promised it, he has to do it. Because the evangelicals have been clamoring for this for a long time. They've been asking for the embassy to be moved to legitimize Israel as the owner of Jerusalem, or as the rightful owner of Jerusalem. But let's not forget that it was, yes, fine, from biblical stories, Israelites occupied the place, they were driven out, and during the Holocaust, millions of them were killed. But as we have it in modern times, the Palestinians have been there. They also feel a sense of ownership to Jerusalem and to some parts of that land. So what has been happening is that since the Britons in 1948 brought in the Israelis to come and occupy, about 750,000 Israelis as at that time, Israelis have been migrating in their numbers from different parts of the world. And as they are coming in, their territories are expanding. And this has led to a lot of hostility in that region, which has made all the countries in the UN to come together and say, okay, look, we are going to have to keep status quo for now. Israelis, don't increase your number of settlements. Palestinians, keep to your side until we reach the solution. Unfortunately, it has lingered for a long time.
All right.
Trump has taken it upon himself to move the embassy to Jerusalem.
All right, now, as at yesterday, Ivanka, the daughter of Trump, yes, she was sent to represent the father, and the husband made a statement. Trump promised, and Trump delivered. But what you said also, you talked about him trying to satisfy his base. Yes. Is this all political to Trump, or we have other factors at play?
Yes. The most significant factor, I would say, is at play here. Permit me to go a little spiritual, will be the God factor. Because most of these things, if you read the Bible, has been prophesied from time immemorial that the Israelites will come back to that place to possess it. And America as a country is very sensitive to the Bible. You know, they call it God's own country. And has been very, very, for a long time, been very, very sympathetic towards the Israeli cause. Which I can understand because, you know, from Bible, any nation that supports or that goes against Israel would do so at their own peril. And any nation that supports Israel also does so at their own advantage. So America for a long time have always supported, even the Britons, the West in general, have always been behind Israel. And permit me to say that to some extent, Israel has been abusing that privilege. In as much as they are Muslims, they may have different faiths, I still believe that Israel should tamper down on the hostility. Because fine, the Palestinians have been moving towards the border fence, and Israel is trying to defend its own side of the territory. But at the same time, you hear of minimal force. You could use rubber bullets to deter these guys. There is still the option of the tear gas. But where you now have to use lethal force as your first option, it's disheartening. Because I believe that these guys can be warded off for some time, at least giving room for the UN Security Council to also come to a resolution on how to proceed on this matter. Let's not forget that the EU has been united in their criticism against what Trump has done unilaterally. We don't want this for now. Let nobody move their embassy to Jerusalem for now, because you moving it there will be legitimizing a certain faction, which in this case is Israel. But Trump, being who he is, just like he told he reneged on the Iran nuclear deal some days ago, this is a deal that was, negotiated by your predecessor in the person of President Obama. But you come along believing that Obama doesn't know what he's doing. Anything Obama does is not good enough, maybe because he's from an opposing party, and you have to upend everything that he has done. This character of Mr. Trump has to be checked. And it's so sad that even those that are meant to advise him are warmongers. Take, for example, John Bolton, the new National Security Advisor, is someone who has been clamoring for regime change in Iran for a long time, because he's a radio host, and his radio program, all he talks about is regime change for Iran. And it's disheartening that that's the same person that Trump would choose as his National Security Advisor. And these are the guys that are responsible for some of the actions that he's taking today. Even Mike Pompeo is another warmonger. The recent, the newly sworn in Secretary of State to the United States. So these are people who are clamoring for war. I don't know, maybe there's something they gain from it, especially the Republican Party. It's very sad, but every time the Republican Party is at the helm of affairs in America, there's always crisis in the world. Go and check from time immemorial. Every time the Republican Party produces the president of the United States, there's always instability in the world, and you just wonder why they can't be as diplomatic as the Democrats, who always try to seek for peace. I can remember how President Obama painstakingly negotiated the Iran deal, and then you just come along because you feel that anything Obama does is not okay with your people, your base, maybe for some racist sentiments too. You come and you append it.
No, you are not sure of that. That he's a racist. Because he never said he was a racist. He was like the president of the world, of America, president of a free country.
Attitude speaks louder.
All right. All right. Now, from what Benjamin Netanyahu said yesterday, said we are defending our territory. Do you think it's because of the presence of Hamas in that protest that really made them to use live rounds in the first instance? Because Hamas are the one that, projecting the Palestinians, says we're going to protest, we're going to use whatever we have to voice out our displeasure in this arrangement because Donald Trump is behind this. This isn't fair. And Hamas, according to Israel, is a terrorist group. So are they not justified?
Yes, in as much as you want to say Hamas is a terrorist, or Benjamin Netanyahu would want to say Hamas is a terrorist group, the truth too is that Benjamin Netanyahu has been spoiling for a war too with the Palestinians. It's always been there. There's just this. I don't know what. Maybe it's historical amongst them to always, because there was a part of the Bible I read one time where God said the hands of the Muslims as a
all right, can we just leave the Bible out of this? Let's go to the political aspect of faith, the security aspect of faith.
So what I think is that Hamas is a group has been seen as a terrorist group by different nations, and it's been said that they hijacked the protests, which was supposed to be a peaceful one. But the truth is that, from what I saw, at least on TV, only Molotov cocktails were being thrown at the Israeli military. I didn't see armed people on the other side amongst the protesters. So even if you are to say the Hamas as a group, it's made up of persons. So if they are not armed, they still have a right to protest with the Palestinians. So I didn't see arms with them. I didn't see them through explosives. I wasn't there on ground, but at least from the reports I got, even from protesters that were on ground, that Hamas didn't hijack the protest. So I don't know if this is just a front by the Israelis to use lethal force on these guys because they are protesting and you feel they're using force would pull them away from the defense. But I think, from my own angle, that as long as they were not armed, they had a right to protest. Just like every citizen of the free world has a right to protest an opinion or a law or anything that doesn't favor them. As long as the other side is not armed, I don't see why lethal force should be used.
But from what they said, these guys are throwing stones, they are throwing improvised explosive devices at the Israeli security forces. So that was what really prompted them to retaliate in protection or defense of their territory.
That is what Israel is saying. And if someone is coming to tell you, oh, bombs are being thrown at us, IEDs and the rest of them, I mean, there should be casualties on the other side. I haven't heard of any, at least since this recent protest started, I haven't heard of casualties on the Israeli military side. Yes, there's been injuries because normally riots are characterized by some unruly behavior, like throwing of Molotov cocktails, stones and all that, which usually what riot police does is to have a shield to ward off those stones and then maybe shoot tear gas in the air. Like, I know there was a time Israeli forces also used aerial tear gas on some of the protesters. But in this particular situation, these guys are protesting because they have a right to that place. If the U.S. president, or the U.S. now, because the president represents the U.S., if the U.S. that is supposed to be an unbiased umpire in this two-state solution, they've always led the way. And now the U.S. is saying that the embassy should be moved from Tel Aviv to Jerusalem. What are you spelling for the understanding that has always been there in the region? That Israel has won the day. And you are telling me they don't have a right to protest? No, they do. So if they are protesting and they've not used lethal force to protest, you should not also use lethal force to resist. So I don't think it is justified to have killed 54 persons and you say you are just trying to defend yourself. I saw the footage, and at least from what I could gather, there was no lethal force on the side of the protesters. It was just an aggression from the side of the Israeli military, which I feel could have used tear gas to dislodge those protesters, and also used, if possible, rubber bullets. These things are available, but I think they just prefer, at the slightest provocation, to resort to killing the Palestinians.
All right, now would you want to also agree with the fact with what one of the UN representatives talked about, that Israel violated human rights in what they did yesterday, though they have these schemist report that Hamas says they will continue with the protests? Would you want to agree to the violation of human rights as leveled against Israel in the just, or will I say, ongoing protests?
Yes, I would agree to that. And Israel didn't start that today. Israel has been, to some extent, they've been bad actors in the region too. In as much as they feel they have an entitlement to the land, that they lost it at some point and they have to get it by force. But against the UN Security Council agreements, Israel has been expanding territories at the expense of the Palestinians. A Palestinian once put it like this, that it's like two people are dragging for one cheese, one particular, and then you are asking both parties not to touch the cheese, but one particular party is eating from it and the other one is just watching. Because there's not been records of Palestinians increasing their own territories. It's just been Israel going into Palestinian territories, defending it by force, killing if they have to. Why? Because they feel they have allies like the US, the UK behind them, and that if push comes to shove, they will be able to absorb whatever comes internationally. So in this particular protest, I think Israel has been abusing the rights, the human rights of the Palestinians, who have the inalienable right as a citizen of the free world to protest. If Trump says this should be moved from here to here and they are not okay with it, they have a right to protest. And you also have a right to resist as Israelis by using minimal force until maybe they cross over to your own side. You can then say, okay, this is real hostility, we have to do something about it. These guys have not crossed over the fence. Yes, they are close to the fence, they are throwing stones. You can shield yourself from the stones. They were not shooting bullets. I didn't see them shoot, I didn't see them throw bombs over, even if the Israelis have been claiming so. But you can't tell me people are throwing explosives at your military forces and then casualties have not been recorded on your side. I mean, we all have our natural intelligence, and just because the world or the major forces in the world seems to be backing you, doesn't mean the rest of us are fools. But I think no matter what the Israelis think that they have, or whatever rights that they think that they have, they should respect the fact that they have neighbors. They have people who have rights to existence, to their own existence. And if only they would just respect that fact, I think there will be some peace restored in the region. And then the UN should speedily look into this matter
all right.
to ensure that...
Now, before we go into the position of the UN, because when this happened and it's still happening, everyone reacted,
yes,
saying what is going on is totally wrong, and they choose to withdraw their ambassador, so to speak, from Israel.
Sure, yes.
South Africa followed suit. France also spoke against what the Israelis are doing. Do you see this degenerating? Do you see Iran coming into the battle? Do you see Turkey also sending troops in order to protect the Muslim brothers?
Yes, the Muslims have been united in one voice. And what they've always said is that, okay, fine, we are all committed to a two-state solution. Let us define the terms of these two states, Let us ensure that they are both secure, living side by side, even if there are boundaries, they can decide their own individual fate. But until these boundaries have been drawn, let us keep status quo. So the aggressors here in recent times have been Israelis. And these nations have all stood together to say, look, this is not right. If we've all come together to say, this is what we should do pertaining to this matter, then Israel should stay put until it is totally resolved. Why is Israel always, why are Israelis always the aggressors in the region? Why not the Palestinians? Fine, I'm not saying the Palestinians have not been bad actors at some point. But what we've been hearing is that the Israelis are increasingly building settlements in places occupied by Palestinians. And the Palestinians who feel that Israelis were brought from far and wide are threatened by the fact that they are losing their lands every day to Israelis, and because they have nuclear power, because they have some forces behind them, they feel they can oppress the Palestinians. And the Palestinians are only naturally reacting to the fact that, look, we both own this land, and there is this issue on ground that we have to resolve before you guys take all of the land. So I think Iran, because this could degenerate, I'm just praying that this doesn't degenerate into another world war, because the Middle East is so volatile. That's why previous American presidents have always been very careful on their dealings with these nations, because they know what could happen if they declare Jerusalem the capital of Israel. What have you done? What have Mr. Trump done? He has just said that Israel owns the place. And are you expecting the Palestinians to just lay back and not do anything about it? They have to survive. It's an innate thing in every man to survive, to compete and survive, even if he has to die doing it. So that's what you are saying. Different nations are going to react in different ways, and Erdogan have always said it that they will cut diplomatic ties with Israel if these hostilities continue. And Israel has just refused to stop. So and now that the Iran nuclear deal is off the ground, Iranians, even if they are still trying to salvage the deal, and I know their ambassador, some of their ambassadors have been holding diplomatic talks with different Western nations, with different European nations, to see if without the US, they can continue to maintain status quo on the Iran nuclear deal. But you can tell now that it's no longer the Middle Easterners that are destabilizing the world. It's the US president who wakes up, doesn't consult with other nations, and just takes unilateral decisions, irrespective of the ramifications of the decision he has to take. He just takes them and doesn't care what happens. Just look at one pronouncement. 54 persons are already dead. Only God knows what the count will be by now. And we've always known this region as a region where people don't back down. They would rather die than have what is theirs taken from them. So that's why people have always been, different nations have always been careful when it comes to decisions pertaining to the Middle East. But the US being what it is today with the current president is destabilizing the world. And it's so sad that the US that used to be the stable hand that is holding the world is now the same hand that is disorganized.
So now from what you're saying right now, with the pronouncement of Jerusalem as the capital of Israel by US opening or placing their embassy there, that would just become the beginning of the end of the two-state solution.
Yes.
Is that what you're saying right now?
Because if you, who is supposed to be a mediator in the matter, is now seemingly taking sides, because if we say it's supposed to be, or we are still looking at a two-state solution, you are going to be looking at how are we going to make Jerusalem habitable for both parties. How do we, do we say from this side to this side belongs to the Palestinians and from here? So all of that was still being looked into by the UN and by the different nations that make up the UN Security Council, just to ensure that both parties are satisfied. Yes, it's been a very, very tall order, having to look at these matters dispassionately by these nations, but some progress have been made. Why not give this two-state solution some more time to breathe, and let's see if it can come to fruition, rather than just waking up and saying, oh, look, I made the promise to my people that I'm going to move this embassy, even if you know that it's going to lead to violent protests in the place. The US president went ahead and declared Jerusalem the capital of Israel. So what then is the role you are supposed to play? If you have said on your own, being one of the strongest forces that is looking into the matter, you have said that Jerusalem now is the capital of Israel. You've inadvertently said that Jerusalem belongs to the Israelis, and you wouldn't expect the Palestinians to just back down without a fight.
All right, now,
what you have.
With this development, do you see Iran quickly hastening up the nuclear power drive? Because Israel think that Iran saying, you guys want to cut corners, you want to use some certain skills of wisdom to go weaponize your nuclear armament, of which Iran denies it. But what is happening right now? Do you think they will want to know or want to care about the position of the US in the deal?
Yes, some of their clerics, and usually when you want to feel the pulse of the Iranians, all you need to do is look in the mosque and just look at their clerics and what they are saying. You get to feel the pulse of the people and what exactly will be their next line of action. According to one of their clerics, Ahmad Khamenei, he has been saying that they are going to develop their missile power, that they are not going to develop atomic bombs because there's still so much they need to do. But as for their missile capabilities, they are going to raise it to a whole new level to make sure that if Israel continues in this line of hostility against their Muslim neighbors, they are going to turn Israel to dust. And these rhetorics have increased since the Iran nuclear deal was reneged upon by the US president. These guys have, at least all the European nations have agreed that to some extent, even if you still would want to say Iran is a rogue nation, to some extent they've been trying to adhere to what was in the Iran nuclear deal. I mean, they've been inspected every now and then by the IAEA. So they've been trying to keep the peace, in as much as, yes, they still do one or two things here and there, but to some extent, they've tried to abide by the deal. Isn't it sad that it is now the U.S. whom we are thinking would be the good actors here, keeping to their own end of the deal, that is now reneging on that deal? And now you are running off to North Korea to make another deal. Now what makes you think that Kim Jong-un will believe you that another president won't come and upend the deal that you are negotiating now, because who knows, maybe that president will be a Democrat? Because it's quite obvious that from what Donald Trump said during his campaign trail, that everything Obama stands for, he is going to have to upend them. Why? Because his base doesn't like them. So even if he's going to destroy the world, because his base doesn't like it, he's going to have to do it just to please the electorates or the people who voted him into power. In as much as you are going to do that, you are going to try to please the people who voted you. I mean, you need to look at the ramifications of your action as the leader of the free world, which America, in the with President Trump at the helm of affairs, has lost in recent times. You could even imagine Senator McCain being mocked by one of his aides. Until now, the White House has not deemed it fit to even apologize, even when an aide said, forget about Senator McCain, he's dying anyway. He's a man who is suffering from cancer, a prisoner of war. He has been mocked countless times by the US president. But as it were, because the tone of the leader dictates the tone of his followers, the people around him have taken up that tone, and they just behave the way they like. And that's what we are seeing in this crisis in the Middle East. He takes unilateral decisions. He doesn't care what anyone thinks. As long as my people like it, then let's go ahead and do it. So I think the major problem here is the person in the White House.
Is a person in the White House. Now,
Yes.
What do you have to say about the position of the UN? It's like the House is divided, but we have what they call 5 permanent members. What do you think they will say about this?
Yes,
Can they tell Trump to beat a retreat, or they will see everything degenerating before their very eyes?
No, I'm hoping that the president of Russia, who is also a very influential person, if not the most powerful man in the world, is someone.
Putin?
Yes, Vladimir Putin. He's someone that the U.S. president adores, right from his campaign trail. He's never hid his admiration for President Putin. So I'm hoping that Putin, Xi Jinping of China, Angela Merkel of Germany, they can all come together and talk some reason into President Trump on this decision that has been made. Although I don't see him reneging anyway, because it has been done, and the evangelicals have been screaming hallelujah. You know, different pastors have been praying. They are happy. And these are the core of his base in America. I don't think he would want to renege on it for political reasons. But who knows? Maybe some reason can be talked into him by these leaders on how best to proceed. Because his unilateral actions is not helping peace around the world. America has always been a country known for stabilizing the world. But since Mr. Trump came on board, it's been known as a destabilizing force, and it's very sad. Even up to the Paris Accord till today, America is still out of it. Only America and Nicaragua are the only nations out of the Paris Accord. So America is ready to plunge the world into more problems pertaining to climate change. Even if everybody is screaming, we have to reduce CO2 emissions, President Trump has insisted that he wants co-workers to come back to work, even when Obama did all that he could to protect the environment. But President Trump is hell-bent on bringing coal back to the fore, polluting the environment.
All right, finally, because our time is up, do you see other nations of the world following suit what America did, taking their embassies to Israel, to Jerusalem in Israel, saying that, look, Israel owns the land, briefly?
Yes, I've heard some countries say that. I've heard some countries say that they would follow suit, but only a few nations have indicated interest in doing that. So, but I still think majority of the nations around the world are united in one voice, saying that, look, only a two-state solution will solve the problem between Palestinians and Israelis. And I still think that more time should be given for such resolutions to be made, because this is a matter of territory and is going to be keenly contested. So it's not something you just wave, with the hand. It's something that has to be done with careful deliberations amongst the nation.
All right.
So I think America should relax a little,
all right,
and allow peace reign.
All right, America should relax a little and allow peace reign. Thank you so much, William Zuwaifa, for your wonderful analysis. Let's just see Donald Trump will hit, because right now the body count, yesterday morning 14 to 32, now to 54. Is it going to increase? Body count just keep piling. Is that the way they want to really make Israel, or Jerusalem, the capital of Israel, better with blood? What will the UN do? What will Xi Jinping do? What will Putin do? What will Macron do? What about Angela Merkel? What is she going to do about it? Palestinians, they are raging Hamas. It's like saying, do or die. We don't want this. Would others come to their aid? Is it going to lead to a global phenomenon negatively? I mean, negatively, is it going to be an all-out war against Israel if time is not taken? Ours is to report what we've seen, what we've heard, to you to inform, educate, and of course, entertain you. I'm Winston Marshall saying, but blessed, be strong, stay out of trouble. Your destiny has always been in your hands. Bye for now.